When it comes to putting, there are so many different elements we need to get right. Today we're going to be meeting up with PJ professional Jack Backhouse, who's going to run us through some great drills and tricks to help improve your putting. So if someone was coming to you for like a first putting lesson, what would be kind of like the key things you'd want to cover to get them started?
So the first thing I try to get people thinking about on putting in general is we're probably not going to knock in loads of putts, because statistically we just don't. So I'm always thinking about, well, where do I want to hit my next putt from? So for example, on this putt we've got here, we've probably got about 20 feet, so my make rate is really low. So I'm genuinely not trying to knock this in. All I'm trying to do is, where do I want to leave myself for my next putt? What's the easiest next putt? So we've got a putt here which is like straight uphill. So what I don't want to do is hit it 3 feet by and leave myself a really fast, tricky, downslope, downhill putt. So I'm looking at this putt straight away and I'm thinking, right, well actually the best place for me to putt from would be short, and then I'm going to try and create a swing that leaves me like a foot short generally. Which
is quite an interesting mindset, because I think a lot of time people would think, this is uphill, oh god, like make sure you give it enough to get there.
Yeah.
But like that downhill coming back, we know it's just like the worst putt, you just don't want it.
Definitely, I think there's like a golf stigma of like never up, never in, and if you leave it short, you know, it's a wasted shot. But actually, we're just not going to knock them all in. That's the fact, unfortunately. It'd be great if we did. So I'm always thinking, if I get it to the hole, then that's great. But actually on a putt like this, I'm trying to just drop it on the front edge, tap it in and move on to the next one.
So the thought is almost like moving more into speed control than necessarily like start line.
Definitely. On anything outside of probably 8 feet, I'm almost not really worried about the line. All I'm trying to do is get the ball running to the hole and to stop anywhere sort of around it. Outside of 8 feet, you know, the tour players make 50% from 8 feet. So me, as like an amateur golfer, well, certainly not a tour player, I'm not going to knock that many in. So outside of 10 feet, my make rate is so low, I'm just trying to stop the ball on the edge, tap it in and move on to the next one.
For speed control, if people wanted to work on that, what would be like some good drills or maybe technique that you would want them to look at?
So another golf myth that people sort of subscribe to is that they need like a putting stroke where they're accelerating through the ball. Now, what I found is people who have like massive acceleration are actually really poor at speed control. So the first thing I think about, or try to get golfers thinking about, is making a stroke where it's sort of the same speed all the way through. I'm not necessarily sort of decelerating, but I'm definitely not trying to hit it or accelerating. And then that generally gives us a fairly consistent like pop off the face, and the ball sort of rolls at the same speed. The best drill I would probably do for distance control is I'd get all these balls and I'd probably just stand at the hole and throw them into lots of different locations. I'd just play each shot. I wouldn't worry about knocking it in. I'd just sort of score myself on, is that a tap in? Yes or no, that's a point, and then move on to the next one. What I try not to do with golfers, and I try and get this sort of in very early, is we don't want to stand here and hit 10 balls from one spot and go, that was a great lag putting session. What we're trying to do is hit lots of different random putts. It's actually the art of speed control is being able to estimate how hard to hit it, and by hitting lots of different shots you can train that, whereas if you hit one shot 10 times, actually you've only practiced one putt instead of practicing 10 different putts.
Yeah, because I think people forget out on the golf course, you know, not only is every putt we get on each hole a different distance, but it's kind of a different shape of shot, like is it right to left, left to right, some are downhill, some are uphill. So actually practicing those in succession, like on the putting green, is going to much like improve your performance on the course than just one shot over and over again.
Unfortunately, and this is why golf is so hard, isn't it? Because every shot you hit in a day is different. You know, you never hit the same shot twice. You have to practice in that manner. So you want to hit like one uphill right to left, one downhill left to right, one flat but across a slope, and you know, vary it as much as possible, because golf is random, putting is really random. So you have to practice you know, the infinite number of shots that you're going to find when you're out there.
So obviously on longer putts we're really focusing on speed control, but when it comes to like this kind of distance, you really need to start the ball on line to have a chance of holing it. So what would you be working on with people from here?
So once we get inside 5 feet, start line basically is the be all and end all. What we're trying to do is get that face returning back to square as much as we possibly can. The best drill I use for this is just using sort of wooden tees. So how I do it is I line the putter shaft at the hole, And at the end of the grip, I stick in 2 tees that are roughly like a ball width apart. And then I stick a tee in just behind where the ball's going to be. So I've got the same starting point the whole time. So then all I'm going to do is stand here, and you can do this sort of very like repetition. You can stand here and do this like block practice instead of random practice like we do the long putting. Just stand here, try and knock the ball through the tees, and hopefully it goes in the hole. All we're trying to do is work on, can we start the ball through that gate? And if you have, perfect. If you haven't, if you're hitting the right tee, the face is a little bit open, so you probably need to address that. Left tee, it's short, address that obviously. But short putting's much more simple. It's just pick your line and then create a stroke that starts the ball on that line.
And what would you be doing in terms of aim? Because obviously sometimes people don't start online purely because they're just literally aiming like over here or over here and they don't really realise. So this drill is obviously going to really help them in terms of kind of dialing in where they want to start the ball. Would you be using like a line on your ball to get it pointing to the middle of those tees or not?
I like to start with a line because it's really obvious then, isn't it, where the ball is aiming, and then getting your putter lined up to that. Now I know loads of players who don't like the line because it puts them off. That sort of, the golfer has to experiment that for themselves. But if you're going to line the ball, so this ball has a line on it, a black line already on it, so I point that at the hole. What I then definitely do, and people don't do this, and this is where it goes wrong, is they don't check to see where the line is aiming. So I'll stand behind it, I'll look down the line, I think, yeah, that's about right. And then actually what I then do is I check it with the shaft, where I'm lining up the black line on the ball with the side of the shaft. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that that's okay. And then I'll step into it, I match the line on the putter with the line on the ball, which is pointing through the tees at the hole. And then again, I just knock it through. Perfect.
So I think lots of golfers make the mistake of just presuming like every putt is straight and just hitting it straight at the hole. Or they just don't appreciate how much break there is, and then they manipulate their stroke loads because they're not actually aiming in the right place.
Yes.
How can people work on like improving that green reading?
I know loads of people that just can't see slope for some reason. They stand behind the ball and they tell me it's straight, and it's definitely not. The first thing I do is I like walk the line of the putt, and when I'm doing this, I can sort of feel in my feet that there is some slope and I'm leaning one way. Straight away, my feet are telling my brain that there's a slope from this way. And then once I've walked the line of it, I then sort of drop down to where I think the low side is. Because generally from the side of the putt, you get a much better view of the slope.
Yeah, we can see so much more slope here than we did over there.
We could definitely see more from down here. So I've walked it and I've created a bit of a picture, and then I sort of drop down, and that sort of, the picture's becoming a lot more clear now. And then I'll sort of loop back round to the ball, already thinking, well, this is quite a slopey putt. Green reading is a bit of an art in that there's no sort of science to, it's definitely 8 inches from here, or 10 feet or whatever. It is a bit of a guessing game. So a bit like what we did with the long putting, you have to practice this very randomly. And then what happens is over time you get a feel for, when it feels and looks like this, it's probably about 2 feet of break. And when it feels and looks like this, it's only 4 inches, for example. The way I practice this, and the drill I use, is I'll put a ball down like we have here, I'll walk it, and then I'll drop to the low side, I'll come back, and so I've got a really clear idea of what's going to happen now. So what I like to do is I grab a tee, and I stick a tee in the ground, sort of halfway up the putt, and what I'm trying to do is I'm going to see if I can put the ball around the tee and get it to drop back to the hole. And what that does is it creates a really clear image in my mind of what the line looks like. So and now in my head, I'm sort of almost imagining like a literal line that travels up around the tee and then drops back down to the hole.
I think it gives you a good reference as well, because people then fall into the trap of thinking, all right, well, it's 2 foot right, so I'm going to aim at that and hit it. Then they have no idea if they've actually started it there or not.
Exactly.
So like, have I read that wrong, or have I kind of pulled or pushed it? Whereas at least with that tee peg, when you're looking up, you have some reference of if it's gone like anywhere near that.
Exactly. You're always trying to like benchmark it, I think, where so we'll hit a putt around that tee, or try and get it around the tee. So that was low, and it's finished high, so that tee's definitely not in the right place. We just readjust, move the tee down, coming back and have another look. You know, you can definitely move the tee if you think it's in the wrong place as well, and then have another go. And then what happens is you're sort of building up a bit of an image of, that was closer, but it's probably still slightly too high. So now if we move it back to probably about where it should be, it's then actually, you can now see a very clear image of the ball has to go around that tee and it probably will go in. So you sort of take a mental log of that and then move on to another putt. So if I was practicing this, I'd probably have 3 balls, a few tees, hitting lots of different putts and just really trying to get a feel in my mind of, if it feels like this, the ball's going to do this.
I think this is nice as well where you move the tee peg, because you see how much that affects like where the ball finishes. So if in my mind I knew this was summer and it was really quick and I really didn't want to get the ball like low of that hole because it was just going to disappear, I can kind of think, right, well in these increments I know it's going to move this much extra or less.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was out playing on the course, you obviously can't stick a tee in the ground and putt around it, but I like to try and almost imagine that there is a tee in the ground and I'm worrying less about the hole. I'm trying to imagine, where do I want the ball to finish? And then I think, right, well, where do I need to put the tee peg to go around it for the ball to finish in that area? Because again, probably not going to knock this in, but if we can just get the ball finishing in that landing spot or the zone where we want to putt from next, we've got a good chance of 2-putting and getting away.